Oh, my microphone is muted. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Creating a User-Friendly SharePoint Intranet. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Reese Herberg. I'm the Marketing Administrator here at Opfinity, and I'm going to be running the presentation today. I'm just going to give it a few more minutes for anyone else that wants to join, and then we're going to get started. In the meantime, I'm just going to pull up and make sure everything is ready. Right? The meeting today also should wrap up before 1, we're hoping. So if you delegated an hour, hopefully we'll get you out of here before then, but not without a few useful tips first. All right, I'll give it like 1 more minute, and then I'm just gonna get started here. I'll also just post it in the Q&A so you all know where that is, and feel free to pop questions in there throughout. We're gonna have a delegated section for Q&A at the end, but if a question pops up while I'm doing the demo and I don't catch it, feel free to utilize that. All right. With that, I think we're just gonna jump in and get started. So first, some housekeeping items. Again, like I had previously said, I know that on the Eventbrite it said that this is going to be an hour. We're hoping to get you out of there before then, depending on how many questions we get in, but appreciate you staying on the call and staying for the entire time. At the end, we are going to have a Q&A section, so if you have any questions in particular, feel free to hold off until then. And we're also going to be announcing some future events, so if you're on your SharePoint journey, definitely stay for that. We're going to be doing an entire series on SharePoint, so that announcement will be towards the end of what to expect next. SharePoint is just one giant animal, so there's so much to get into and so many aspects of the platform that if you're not currently utilizing, could really benefit improving engagement and collaboration in your organization, especially if you're paying for the licensing. You may as well get the most of it. So this is the second of our SharePoint series, and we are going to announce our future ones towards the end. So stick around for that. So what you can expect from today's webinar, we're going to do a brief Microsoft SharePoint introduction. As I previously mentioned, we actually did have a previous webinar, and that was just Introduction to SharePoint, a very bare bones webinar on getting started for people who maybe have never even played around with this SharePoint interface before. Today's webinar is going to be slightly more advanced. Not anything that's too difficult to keep up with, but definitely getting into some of the more nitty-gritty features of SharePoint, features that you may not already be using or may not be considering make sense for your organization. But if you're looking for the webinar on how to actually get started on SharePoint, I will definitely send in a follow-up link the recording of our first webinar, which is more for introductory level. Then we're going to get a little bit into getting started. Again, we already covered this in the last webinar, so I'm just going to try to briefly go over it, and then get into the actual meat of the presentation today, which will be creating that user-friendly site, using features to increase engagement and collaboration across your network. And then wrapping up, just because we're focused on cybersecurity, just some holes that you may find as you're utilizing these features, with more communication equals more risk. So just how to avoid some of those pitfalls and keep yourself and your organization safe. All right, so firstly, a brief introduction to Microsoft SharePoint. Microsoft SharePoint is a user-based collaboration platform that is integrated with your Microsoft Office license. It sort of operates, depending on how you're using it, rather for a private or public site, as a way to, as a hub of sorts within your organization, to have access to files, to meetings. You can sort of think of it as an interweb site to your organization. There's two forms of SharePoint sites, which are public and private. Private is a SharePoint site that you're utilizing within your organization that only you and members of your organization have access to, whereas public, you can spread a wide array of information across with just a link that can be publicly accessed. Today, we're going to be focused more on internal sites, just because that's where you can really create that escalated form of engagement within your organization, whereas on public sites, it gets a little bit trickier. But we do plan on doing a public site webinar in the future, so definitely keep an eye out for that. So what is SharePoint used for? That's document management, content management, knowledge management, and project management. So again, highly if you're somebody who is already utilizing SharePoint within your organization, which I'm assuming if you registered for this, you are. You most likely have used the bare bones of document library, content management, maybe a little bit, and knowledge management, but maybe you're struggling on how to make your SharePoint A, easily navigatable, and B, increase employee engagement. If you find that your employees or your peers aren't really clicking on links, aren't really utilizing, what the hub is fully spaced for, if they're maybe a little bit apprehensive towards SharePoint, this will hopefully give you some tools to use to encourage that participation. So again, this we already went into, but just some things to consider. Definitely, if you're somebody who works in a, let's say, legal or financial institution or medical practice, some of the practices that we may go over today might not meet your compliance standards, especially in terms of how you're tagging documents or how you're sharing documents. So just keep that in mind. If you have an allocated legal team or a team for that, before you make a huge overhaul of your site, I would encourage just consulting them and making sure that you're not in infringement of any laws. Again, licensing, if you already used it, you already know the pricing, but just wanted to quickly have a slide on that in case you're not familiar with which Microsoft license incorporates SharePoint or which one you're already using. All right, and then we're going to get into getting started with the actual SharePoint hierarchy and just some considerations that you should have prior to beginning your journey of rather fixing your SharePoint site or adding onto your SharePoint site. So again, this is going to be the first half of the webinar, and then the rest of the half of the webinar is going to be an actual demo in which I'm actually going to navigate through the SharePoint site and show you how to do these things in real time. But how does your SharePoint hierarchy work? So you have your central hub, which filters out to departments, clients, employee, and resources. Then you have all these individual pages. This increases segmentation for your organization, which can increase engagement just by creating more targeted SharePoint framework within subsites. However, it also opens you up to a lot more work because you have to make each of these individual subsites A, functional, and B, actually worthwhile for your users to use. If you're not making full usage of it, your coworkers or your employees aren't going to want to be on it either. If it's messy and hard to follow, or if it doesn't feel relevant to their department, they're not going to want to be on it. So the question is, how do we make these subsites or these segmented sites user-friendly, which is what we're going to get into today. So what is a SharePoint intranet? A SharePoint intranet is a private network that is accessible only to an organization's employees. So again, today we're going to be focused just on that private site that you hopefully already have. It provides a centralized location for your employees to collaborate and communicate important information or relevant information to, especially if you're a large organization, to different departments. So for example, we have one for marketing, we have one for HR, we have one for IT, and those don't intersect. Those are specific to those teams. That allows for increased segmentation. If you have one overarching site for your organization, I would highly encourage you to consider making those segmented sites. Even if it takes some time, that might be one of the reasons why you're not seeing as much engagement if people don't feel that the site's content is relevant to them. So again, that's just something to be thinking about as we go into our presentation today. So key features to leverage. Again, we actually went fully into if you have no idea how to utilize these things, if these seem entirely unfamiliar to you, in our previous webinar, we actually did a full deep dive on from start to finish how to create these. But again, for this webinar, I'm going to assume that you already have some sort of experience with document libraries, lists, workflows, and search and social tools. So during today's demo, we're going to go into how to make these cleaner or how to leverage these more effectively. But if you need a full tutorial on how to create these things, again, I'll send that follow-up link to our first webinar recording in an email after today's recording today. Okay, so what considerations should you have prior to planning your SharePoint intranet? Again, think about your users. Who is going to be using this SharePoint site on a day-to-day basis, or who do you hope to be using it? So Connecting user research could be as simple as polling people in your organization of what they would like to see on the SharePoint site, what features are working for them, what maybe isn't working for them, or what they never use. Or if you're starting from start to finish, it's just that initial of what purpose should this site serve? Should this be a place where we're working on documents together in real time? Should it be more for planning meetings and events if you're more on the marketing or events planning side? Or if you're in HR, that could look like employee onboarding. Is our employee onboarding process simplified and centralized in that SharePoint site, so new employees can easily access training resources, so they can easily access employee handbooks. What is the purpose of your SharePoint site should be one of the primary questions you are asking yourself in terms of how you're designing it and what features you're implementing. Next is a logical structure and hierarchy. This is something that I find that people struggle the most when it comes to SharePoint. How are you organizing your site in an effective way, in a way that makes sense and is easy to navigate? Oftentimes, a SharePoint homepage is just so overwhelming to users that they don't even know where to start. They don't know what everything means. So I would encourage you to keep it simple. And again, I'll show this in the demo when we get to the actual SharePoint site part. But making sure that we're making it easy to scroll through, making see your call to actions, or rather it be a deadline or your task management, eye-catching and easy to follow, and also labeling things clearly. This is especially important when it comes to documentation. Is your documentation labeled clearly and consistently, aka is it easy to find? We've definitely all been guilty of this, of sort of haphazardly adding documents, not thinking in long term of, oh my goodness, now I need this document from May 2023 and I can't find it. So just making sure that going in, that you're it's a lot easier to go in organized versus then having to clean it up after the fact, after adding a bunch of sheets and documents to the site. And keeping it consistent, just like you want to keep your website design consistent. If your organization has a website, have that consideration going into your SharePoint site. Do people want to stare at your SharePoint site for hours on day, or is it just a cluster of overwhelming information that they don't want to look at? If they don't want to be on your site, they're not going to engage with it. So try to keep it clean and simple. Again, that's just clear and concise labels, breadcrumbs, so buttons that help them know where they're navigating next. Drop-down menus are great. We're going to be getting into all this when I get into the actual demo, but these are just things to consider. So designing for usability. If you haven't taken a look at this SharePoint lookbook, I highly recommend just going through the templates. Again, this just makes it easier for you to make more segmented SharePoint sites. Microsoft has already developed an array of templates that you can use based on what you're trying to do. This goes from, event, different departments, human resources, where they've created sites that, based on testing, have already made sense for these departments. So if you're somebody who you're not really into design, if it's not your thing, Microsoft has you covered, and you can always customize it further in your organization. But at least the SharePoint lookbook is giving you that bare bones design to get you started. So highly encourage you to utilize the resources already at disposal to you, and then go forward with consulting other people in your organization and customizing it. So what does a clean and consistent layout look like? This means keeping the font clear and legible, keeping the color scheme on brand for your organization. So utilize your organization colors, add pictures of your organization, your team, to make it fun if you'd like, but just make sure that it's clean and consistent throughout. So this is one that not a lot of people consider, and maybe it doesn't have to be a consideration for your organization, but if you have especially remote workers that maybe they have to access things on the go sometimes, is your SharePoint site optimized for mobile devices? Oftentimes not, but if it needs to be, this is something to consider too. If people are getting frustrated in your site, having to scroll down, having pop-ups that really are only desktop friendly and not mobile friendly, this might be a consideration of why your employees user or coworkers aren't engaging with your SharePoint site. So a key way into making it mobile friendly is to and I'll get into this in the demo, making your columns more straightforward, making your homepage less cluttered, and making the important information easy to navigate, aka on the top, not all the way on the bottom where they have to scroll 18 times to get through the information. So if you do have users that are going to be on their phone, definitely take that into consideration. Frustration is a huge indicator of people not wanting to be on the site. So the easier site is to be on phone and desktop, the more your employees or coworkers are going to want to be on it. And then incorporate feedback and testing. Sometimes we try things and it doesn't work. Maybe you'll fix your entire SharePoint site and then you'll get even less engagement. Take that as a lesson learned and consult your coworkers and employees with surveys, or just ask what maybe isn't working for them. And utilize A/B testing to see what features are increasing engagement versus what features aren't getting engagement. And incorporate that feedback into constantly improving your site. Which is another note I would say is that this is an ongoing journey. Much like a website, your SharePoint intranet should be consistently updated to reflect the needs of your organization. So make sure that, as you're maybe adding more employees, as you're fixing more departments, different people require different elements in a SharePoint site. So adapt as necessary. Okay, now we're going to get into actually the demo portion of the webinar. So again, this is going to be the meat of the webinar in which I go through and actually show you how to implement these features from your SharePoint site. But I am going to pause here before the demo. I know that that was a lot of information to take in, and I can be somewhat of a fast talker. So if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer any. But if not, then we'll just get started with the demo. I'll just pause for a moment here. Okay, so it doesn't seem like anyone has any questions for now. That's great. Hopefully I'm answering any questions that you had going into it. This next demo part, I'm going to be staring at my screen a bit. So if I miss your question, don't worry, I will get to it at the end. But just make sure that you pop in the chat whenever you'd like. And I'm going to turn off my camera and just share my screen quickly. All right. Okay, so hopefully you're seeing my actual SharePoint site. I just created a few test ones just to go through quickly so we can actually see how we're going to utilize some of these features to make your site more user-friendly. So I'm just going to click on this test site. So as you can see, this test site is very overwhelming. There's a lot going on. So we're just going to go in and quickly fix some of the things that are making it maybe a little bit overwhelming or unusable, and hopefully give you some ideas of also features that you can utilize if you're not currently utilizing them. So first of all, this is our homepage. So this is something to consider, that this is the page that your employees are seeing as soon as they enter your SharePoint intranet. That means that it's the most important part of your SharePoint intranet. This is where everything should be easily accessible, where if people are joining on phone, they should be able to quickly click on something and be able to access it. And it should also just be really easy to navigate and go through. So as you can see, there's just a lot going on here. Not really sure. There's not really like an even flow. There's a weird survey right here. The upcoming events are up here. It's really nonsensical. We're going to go through and actually click edit. And first, on a format level, just go into how we create considerations that influence our users in a positive way to make them want to use our site. So first of all, scrolling down here, when we see important links, this is a great way to have everything on your home page just in one place of what are the most important parts of my organization. So hypothetically, if I'm creating, let's just say that this is an HR intranet. I would want to have my HR resources right here, my leadership handbook right here, technology help. As we know, employees, especially new employees, have difficulties acclimating to a new technological environment. Team contacts are great to have here. Libraries great to have here. But what's not great is that this is so far in the bottom. If somebody's joining my intranet, they're going to have to scroll all the way down here. So a really quick way to fix that is just to use the server, go all the way up. And now I'm having my important links up here. Again, if this is how your intranet is formatted, if you have a place where everything that is essential to your organization, I would encourage just having it on the top. That way, if somebody's quickly just going through, they can easily just click that. Another important aspect I would say too, if hypothetically, if I'm doing this for my HR or for new employees, I'm going to think about things that they would want to see. And again, this is going to be subjective based on what your department needs. But for a new employee, I'm thinking, okay, they're not familiar with any of the people in my organization. So again, I'm taking into consideration the users. This should always be front of mind for you as you're creating your SharePoint intranet. What will be useful for your users? I'm going to utilize the people toolbox to actually have people in my organization that they might need to know at the top of the SharePoint intranet. So again, if you're doing something for IT, it might look different. If you're doing something for marketing, maybe instead of having people at the top, you'll have an event timeline at the top. But again, we're keeping the users top of mind. So I'm just really quickly to do that. I add the people, and I can just type in whoever from my organization, and that's our CEO. And then if I want to have the IT support, I can type him in too. These are keeping the people profiles at the very top, easy to contact. They don't have to scroll through the entire site to find it. And I can also adjust the sizing of it by clicking this drop down here, making it small, medium, or large. And I can add profile links. So hypothetically, if I have like an online site on the website, so okay, I'm putting a face to the name, I can put that in here. Or I can enter a description for the person. So again, CEO, IT support. Let's say I want to have HR. And we can see how this quickly filters to the top. I can make it smaller if I want to make it smaller and make it look cleaner. I can make it medium. I can edit the properties versus here as well. And I can move it if I feel like it's more appropriate over down. But in this way, they have easy access to who's in my actual organization. So again, if you're not already utilizing this feature, highly encourage you to do so. It's also an easy way to familiarize people with the key members of your organization. But all right, for now, after this, I think I'm going to go over to how to create an actual group calendar. Group calendars are a great way to keep key events for your organization top of mind and to clue people into what is going on in your organization. So here you can see I've already created one of upcoming events, but hypothetically, if I didn't have that, or if I wanted to make it look different, from here, I'm just going to add a new section. I'm going to make this section 2 columns. And from here, I can actually exit here. If I want to move this section down, or if I want to edit it to make it 1 column, make it 1 column. But again, we're just making it spaced out a little bit so it's not as overwhelming. Go back to editing. Sorry, I accidentally clicked out. So in here in this section, if I want to add a new calendar, a new web part, I'm going to navigate below that plus sign and click Add a new web part. And for group calendar, it's right up here, frequently used. I'm just going to type group calendar. From here, it's going to show me all upcoming and past meetings. And if I want to create a meeting, let's say again, if this is for employee onboarding, I'm just going to press new meeting. It's going to navigate to my calendar. Employee onboarding session. Press save. Drop down to what calendar I want it to do, press save. And then that will appear in my create a meeting with the exact time. If I have an important event coming up, I can press plus, and I want to type in countdown. And you can actually, let's see, if I have a Halloween bash, that gives them an actual countdown. And you can add pictures, you can customize it. But again, having these sort of important countdowns, projects at the top of your intranet makes more sense, because that way people don't have to scroll all the way down. You're actually making full use of your organization's intranet, because you're using your intranet for what it's intended for, which is increasing employee engagement with events, making it easy for them to navigate to, and also keeping important employee news and events at top of mind. So speaking of news, let's say that your organization is going through a merger and you're trying to keep employees up to date on things that are happening within the organization in terms of that merger. I can actually go through news. I can actually add a news section. Let's say I want to make this side by side or list of important links that employees in your organization need to have access to, or just important important news articles that they can go through. So I make it through here. I can make it carousel. I can edit the properties to select the sites. So again, let's say I'm just going to put in our own company website to show you how that would look like. And I can also link to other SharePoint sites. So if I have a SharePoint webinar site, if I add it in here, our team site, I can make these easily accessible. This is really effective for when you're making these segmented subsites, because then they can quickly access the team site if there's anything important, and quickly go through just with one click. The other section or the other feature I want to bring to your attention in terms of increasing employee engagement are forms. A lot of people don't realize that you can actually integrate Microsoft Forms to increase employee engagement, get feedback real time. Highly encourage you to utilize this if you haven't. Let's see if I do new form. I can name my form of employee onboarding satisfaction. I select create, and it actually is going to take me to a page where I can create this form. So if I'm wanting to get feedback from new employees, which we know with retention rates and turnover rates, this is a great way to, in real time, figure out what was working on your onboarding process. And if you have Copilot, you can utilize Copilot. For this sake, I'm just going to create one really quickly with Copilot, but you can also just do it manually. And it's going to create questions and options for me. And then here, I can press keep it, select responses, and then press send. And this is going to send to anyone in my organization that I want to fulfill the discussion. So if I want to send it, press send, it's going to appear in that person's inbox. But it's also going to appear right here on the home page. So anyone visiting the home page for the first time is going to see this form. All right, so let's talk about how to actually play around and fix key elements of your SharePoint intranet. We've gone over some of the key features, but it still looks somewhat messy, and I want to clean it up somewhat. So let's say with the important links, I want to switch how this looks to make it look more appealing or more aesthetically appealing to the eye. When I click on the important links section from my editing toolbar, I can play around with film strip. You can see how that looks different. Grid. This one makes it sort of long. I don't know if I like that. Button. This is what we had before. List. This looks really clean. Or tiles. I like tiles because they're engaging. They draw the eye. They're my company color, so I'm going to keep it that way. It's the same for people's profiles. Again, we're taking into consideration how people are going to look scrolling through. Here, I would recommend maybe putting in a background. And again, Microsoft automatically generates these for you. Just make it look more engaging. From there, we can make it look just a little bit cleaner by fixing up the boxes. I scroll down, I see this countdown to the employee badge. This is important information that I want people in my organization to have. So that can stay. But maybe I can add a background image. And I can actually use stock images. So for here, since it's Halloween, I'm just going to type in Halloween and see what comes up. Oh, this is fun. Insert that in. Give it a moment to load. And again, like, look, that looks so much better. It draws the eye more. It's a lot more engaging. It's more fun. You know, especially on your employee site. I would encourage you also on the homepage, if you're on an organization where you can take things a little bit less seriously, even for the forms, if I wanted to create a form that was asking, what are you going to be dressed as for Halloween? These are ways that are breaking our employees out of the norm of what they usually see in our SharePoint intranet, and actually drawing their eye of, oh, there's a new form and there's a holiday specific form in that I didn't see before. I'm going to click on that. That catches my eye immediately. It is a way to keep things fun, where maybe if you always update your forms, or if you always have a new event, it's something that they're immediately going through on your intranet. So that's just something to keep in mind if you want to make it more fun or more engaging. Maybe, again, break the rules of seriousness. Not everything has to be so serious. So here with news, again, if I wanted to do top story, I could switch down here just by scrolling down and having my top story here. And then maybe some previous blog posts or articles that I find relevant, I could add in here. And again, just going through and seeing what looks best or what looks cleaner. And this could be entirely based on your own organization's aesthetic, or what has worked in the past. But I would encourage you just to test it out. And that's another tip that has worked for increasing in our organization, is change something entirely one day and see how that increases engagement. Because if people are using your site every single day, they're going to get bored of it. Switching something up, that could be as merely as just switching how your news or how your key documents look side by side, can be eye-catching and engage your employees in a new way. So here I'm just going to keep it for top news. My survey is here. If I want to show form results, I can show form results on the page as they come in. This one doesn't obviously have any responses yet, but if it did, it would appear here. And here we just have important links. Another key feature I did want to bring into your mind as well are highlights. Highlights are a great way, especially if you're in an organization where you're always collaborating and communicating. I would encourage you to utilize highlights to highlight key conversations I've been having, maybe from, if you have you should be all connected to your team site, or from the latest Teams meeting. You can do all company, and this will actually generate any previous conversations or important notes from meetings that have been said. So these are obviously all just put in. But again, just considering what features are highlighting people in your organization, which again was why I encourage you to utilize aspects like the organization chart, of creating, of highlighting people that maybe having an employee of the month section, or just making sure that your organization feels personable to your SharePoint intranet site. This is going to make people want to be in your site more. It's going to make them feel more connected to your site. And it's just a fun way to give people shout outs, or even to give people fun profiles. In our organization site, everyone has their own bio, everyone has their own picture, and that's of course at the bottom of the site because it's less important. But again, when people scroll through, especially new employees, it gives them a more familiar sense of people who are in our organization and their coworkers. Especially if you're somebody who's working remote, this is a great way to make people within your site feel more connected. All right, from here, I'm just going to press republish. And again, we can just see how scrolling through, adding pictures, making the key information at the top just makes it more feasible worthwhile. Obviously, this is still bare bones, but at least it's giving you the idea of how to actually get started and utilizing some of these features. One of the other key features from the homepage that I wanted to bring to your attention is our lists. So again, in our previous webinar, we went through more so how to actually create a list, and how to utilize asset members specifically. But in this case, if I select new list, Microsoft actually has these really helpful pre-made templates that you can utilize. So in this case, since I'm making a pretend HR intranet, if I select the employee onboarding list, you can see that it actually automatically creates a checklist once I press create for employees to follow as they're beginning on with the team. So again, you can create complete by, let's say that I have trainings to do. You can do add new item, IT training. I can set a deadline. This needs to be done by week 1, after 30 days, after 60 days, after 90 days. Let's say it has to be done by week 1. If I want to put in a mentor, maybe somebody that's helping this employee with this, I can type in their email. And I can also add in any relevant files or attachments at the end. So say that there's a guideline how-to, I can attach that here. Or there's a link from our website, or a vendor. You can add that in here. And that makes it easier for them to navigate through. And this makes that onboarding process more seamless. So again, you can play around, and there's a lot of different list templates that we can use, not just for employee onboarding. We did a great one with asset management. So if you're on more of the technical side and you need to keep track of assets or devices, Microsoft actually already automates that for you as well. And that's just as simple as uploading an Excel sheet and having everything in one place. Another fun aspect of SharePoint that you may not already be using are plans. Plans are a great way to keep your team on track with goals in an engaging and organized way. So say I want to keep track for my marketing team tracking. I learn how to type. And I press create. Plans are a great way to create tasks. If I create a task, gather KPIs, and I want to set a due date. Let's say I want that due by the 8th, and I can assign it to whoever in my organization I want working on it. And it makes it fun because you can actually see as you're going which tasks have been completed, which you have left, or which you're in progress of in a really engaging and visual way. You can also pre-schedule ones just by creating add task. And again, through here, you can see all your completed tasks. So again, if I finish this one and I press complete, that's actually going to show my completed tasks. And it just adds a sense of accomplishment, again, to those in your organization. And it's keeping everything on one place, especially for major projects. And again, I find this especially useful in regards to events and marketing. It just makes it really simple for them to keep everything in one place. Another great aspect are spaces. This is actually a newer SharePoint Intranet feature. We actually might do a full webinar just on spaces in the future, so I'm not going to go too much into it. But let's say that you are your company is rather an employee workspace, or your company's location is really important to your organization's identity. So let's say this is senior services rooms. You can just put your space description, and based on how the actual space is formatted, this actually creates a 3D rendering of that space. So if I press create, and again, it's really bare bone because it's just creating the environment. But once you go through, you can add in your own images through the 62er. So let's say that your building is huge and you're and a new employee wants to see where things are in your, well, now it's freaking out, in your company. Spaces are a great way to you could give your employees a tour of your main points of your building. You could design it. And again, it does take some time because you have to add in your own 3D rendering. But if you have the time for it, and that is something that makes sense for your organization, play around with it and see if people find it worthwhile. Again, Microsoft just generated this fake one for us. But you can imagine your actual organization's building in offices within SharePoint spaces, which is a lot of fun. If you guys want us to do a full webinar just on Spaces, happy to do that. Just let me know. But the thing I wanted to go through is just analytics. This is the last thing I'm going to go through today in terms of just how to actually track who is utilizing your CTAs or utilizing your buttons. So if you're not currently reviewing the average time spent per user or your page viewers or just page traffic, this could be one of the key ways of identifying the gaps in your intranet or what's working or what's not working within your organization. So again, just like anything, just like you track your website, track how much time your employees are spending, which pages are generating the most usage, which pages need some work. And that can be a way of consistently improving and identifying how you can edit your page or fix your page or keep your page the same for your organization. And all right, from here, I'm just going to pause really quickly for questions. I know that was, again, a lot of stuff all at once. Key points of just making it easy to flow through, keeping it simple, highlighting important aspects of your organization. If you're not already utilizing employee charts, add members of your organization. They're a lot of fun. Maybe make people make fun biographies and add fun pictures and make it more personable. But again, it's going to be subjective to whatever you're trying to do within your department. But utilizing images, utilizing brand colors, keeping font consistent throughout, these are all important elements of your SharePoint site. So with that, I'm going to return to the presentation and stop sharing. But before we close off for the day, I also just wanted to go through data and security. So again, as you're improving collaboration, you're improving room for cybersecurity risks or cyber risks. So just keep that in mind as you're utilizing especially things like document libraries. And we went into document libraries more in the first webinar, but making sure that you're blocking downloads, that you're managing access correctly. These are all important considerations that you should have going into creating your intranet or improving your intranet. Consult the legal team, consult your compliance teams if necessary, but just make sure that you're keeping wary of who has access to what in terms of your SharePoint intranet. Some drawbacks to prepare for as you're going into your SharePoint. There's going to be employee learning curves, especially if you're somebody who you're planning to revamp your entire site. Give your employees some time to learn how to navigate it and learn some of the new features before you chop it up to a failure. When you're doing that A/B testing, I'd highly encourage you to give it a month for your employees to learn the new features of the site, to experiment around with forms or lists or what have you, or plans, and then see what's working or what's not working prior to just chopping it up to a failure. And again, there are definitely some drawbacks with customizing SharePoint, especially if you're not using any external app integrations. So anticipate that learning curve and also give yourself room to grow. If you're somebody who's doing this for the first time, there's so much to do with SharePoint. Again, that's why we have an entire webinar series on it. So it's easy to get frustrated. Take your time. It's an ongoing journey, and just make sure that you're having fun with it. Okay, with that, we're going to get to Q&A. So if anyone has any questions, or if there's anything that I maybe went over a little bit too quickly or didn't go over that you were expecting today, I'm happy to do so now. All right. So just really quickly going into who we are as an organization. So Opfinity is a managed service provider out in Springfield, Virginia. We provide outsourced IT and cybersecurity to support to small and medium-sized organizations at a flat rate fee. So if you'd like to learn more about website design, cybersecurity support, or IT support, feel free to shoot me an email after this or contact me, and I'd be happy to walk you through a free consultation. Our next webinar is going to be on SharePoint automation. So this is creating rules and automated processes to make SharePoint do the work for you. So I'll be sending the registration link in a follow-up email, but look out for that for next month. With that, we're going to be closing off for today. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great rest of your week, and I'll see you next time.